Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Prince George Valemount Electoral District All Candidates Forum. My name is Gil Quinnell. I'll be the moderator this evening. So the All Candidates Forum is being held in the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh. Thank you. We were going to do a forum with all the candidates, but unfortunately, 2 of the 3 for the Prince George Valemount Electoral District couldn't make it this evening with their regrets. So we've kind of shifted the forum to be more a little fireside chat with Ms. Johansson here, Gwen. Gwen is from the Green Party. So I'll just ask you some. So all the candidates were provided a list of questions that we were prepared to ask them, so there were no surprises or curveballs could be given to anybody. And so Gwen and I are just going to talk about those questions and keep it to that. And we'll have this open chat. This is a non-partisan event, so it's simply meant to provide the candidates, not Gwen in this case, an opportunity to express their ideas, her ideas, and their party ideas on the topics here. And the topic here, the election is quite varied on the issues involved. But keep it narrow, and the interest of this forum was to just look at the energy transition focus. So, and the questions are related to the energy transition and only. So the organizers of this candidate forum are in no way expressing an endorsement of any of the candidates. We're just here to understand and hear ideas and express their views on the questions provided. So Gwen, welcome. There's a microphone right there if you want to just grab the microphone and turn it on. So welcome. So first off, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody here and to the audience who are listening?
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for coming. I will start off then by just kind of giving you a bit of background, my own personal background, because I don't think I know anybody very well in here, and some of you I don't know at all. So I can go back to, I was born and grew up in McBride, which is the community just to the east of here. And after I graduated from high school, I went to UBC and got a bachelor's degree from UBC. And after that, well, later on, I guess, quite a bit later on, I got a master's degree from the University of Oregon in management and process and management, basically. And so that sort of is my early background. I worked in various communities around the central BC, mostly in Green Lake in the Caribou, Lytton, and that was long before it burned down. And then in Prince Rupert, and finally landed in Hudson Hope, and I was there for a very long time. And it was in Hudson Hope that I kind of got interested in, well, number one, energy and energy policy, because the northeast part of BC is the center of the BC energy producing areas. We had just within Hudson Hope boundaries itself, we had 2 of the biggest BC hydro dams, the Bennett Dam and the Peace Canyon Dam. Bennett Dam being the largest one, and it has the Williston Reservoir, which is a storage reservoir that makes the rest of the BC hydro system be efficient. And then Peace Canyon is the 4th largest. And then just now they've completed the Site C Dam, and they're filling that reservoir now. So it produces electrical energy, and they also produce all of the oil and gas that's produced in the province. So it's an energy-centered region of the province. Oh, a little bit like that. Is that better? Okay, sorry. Did you hear anything what I said? Oh, okay, thank you. So we, so that was where I sort of got my interest peaked in energy policy and so on. And I also then became interested in local politics, and it's a small community, so everybody has to do their bit. And so I was on a municipal council for 22 years in Hudson Hope. The last 6 of those were as the mayor. And during my tenure as a mayor, we had a focus on major projects because they've been kind of left undone for a while. And so the 3 of them were we built a huge shop, a maintenance shop. We redid the full sewage system of the sort of the treatments part of it. And we built what was then the largest solar array in the municipal solar array in the province. And it's about half a megawatt, 500 kilowatt hours. And so and if you go to the Hudson Hope website, you can see the array. There is a video on there that shows it right from the very beginning and the construction of it all the way through to what it looks like when we got all the panels on top of all the buildings. And every building, every municipal building in the municipality pretty well has a set of solar panels on it that contributes in some cases 100, excuse me, in some cases contributes 100% of the amount of energy of electricity that that building uses, and sometimes it's just a portion of it. And it's made possible by what was then the grid tie system, so that there was a 2-way meter on it. And so when you were producing more electricity than what the building was using, then it goes into the BC Hydro system, and it's metered that way. And then in the wintertime, when you're not getting very much solar energy, then you draw from the system. And then at the end of the year, there's a reckoning, and they decide how much. If you used more than what you produced, then you have to pay the bill at that time. Otherwise, in some cases, when we had some people who put it on their own house, and sometimes that it would end up being that party would get a check because they had produced more than what they had used. And so that's something that they sort of alternated, or they changed that system shortly after we were finished. But I understand that they've brought it back now, and I don't know the details of they brought it back. But it's an interesting project to look at when we're looking at the future of energy production in BC. So when I was involved with that, well, there was also a lot of oil and gas development there, and the district of Hudson Hope was kind of it was kind of the hole in the donut. There was activity all the way around us, but there hadn't been much activity right in the area that Hudson Hope was in. But then coal bed methane came along, and that was an interesting area as far as they were concerned. So people had to start to deal with the encroachment of industrial development onto their private land. And that is, I don't know, a lot of people don't realize, but they have the right of entry. And so there's a tension between the landowners who own the surface and sometimes the oil companies, which have bought the subsurface. And so the landowners did form an organization to kind of try and deal with this this tension that, did they couldn't say no, which they realized eventually. And they also couldn't say no to a pipeline going through or a feeder line going through. So there was all those things that had to be dealt with. And so I became the president of a landowner organization, and through that, and doing a lot of work then with the provincial government over that, then we had we had an organization, and I was appointed to that, and so I became the co-chair of what was called the Northeast Energy and Mines Advisory Committee, and the other chairman was the representative from CAP, or the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. So I ended up with a fair amount of exposure to what was going on in Victoria and how Victoria worked. And that is one of the things that I would bring to the table, I think, as an MLA.
All right. So, yeah, you're out of time there, so I'll let it go a little longer, but I think where you ended up is a perfect start for our questions.
Okay, that's good.
The first question I have to ask is, currently 98% of the power generated in BC, these integrated grid, comes from clean and renewable sources, making BC a leader in North America when it comes to clean energy. If elected, what will you and your party do to help maintain this leadership?
Right. I do question the hydro is the water going over the dam and through the generators. That's clean. They don't generally talk about the amount of greenhouse gases that are produced in the construction of it, because hydroelectric dams are front end loaded, because all of the big expenses go into the construction of the thing. And so I have a bit of a question in my mind as to how clean it is, because you seldom get to know how much greenhouse gas is being produced. Say in Site C, there's an enormous amount of cement in there. And there's a lot of, and I sat for, I guess, a year, about several months, and watched them bring they had a helicopter logging system, and they were bringing the trees that would be flooded. They were taking them across from the south side of the river to the north, and they brought them across one tree at a time. And so the amount of electricity, or the amount of natural or fuel that was used in that process was tremendous. They used to haul it in with huge amounts. But anyway, we're counting it as green, so we'll continue to count it as green. I don't think that there should be any more big dams in the province. And the reason I don't think that there should be any more big dams in the province is it's just too destructive for us to use the valleys that we have left to, say, produce. Well, it doesn't make any sense to me to use, if you flood the valleys, and then you use the electricity to give to the, or to sell to the say the LNG developments, and it's the LNG which we know is causing, and the development of it, that's causing a lot of the greenhouse gases that are going into the atmosphere. So that seems a bit of a contradiction to me. So so as far as creating electricity, I think that the solar, the wind, and geothermal, they make sense because they're a clean source. Every source has positives and negatives. And so what are the colored cards meaning?
So
Time's up.
So time was up. Yellow is your warning, and red was your time is up.
Oh,
So
I'll try and pay attention to it.
we're good.
Once I get started, I mean,
It's difficult, I know.
you have another question?
Yep. So so we'll go into, so you were going into the LNG and stuff, so we'll also jump right into the fossil fuel side. So if your party is elected, you and your party are elected, how will you lower British Columbia's carbon emissions over the next 4 years?
How will we lower the emissions?
Yeah.
Well, there's a number of ways that we could do it. Number one, we could, if we chose to, we could stop taking it out of the ground. Number two, we can create a better system of regulation of the oil and gas industry so that there is less opportunity for there to be leaks, like methane leaks is a big issue. And so we could reduce that, certainly. And we can nobody seems to be dealing with demand side management. And that's what I've noticed in this whole process. They're all talking about how are we going to create more electricity, because nobody's saying maybe we should look at managing the demand for the electricity. Do we have to have all of these things that we're using it for? Could we, I think there's a culture that change that it would be good to try and get. And it used to be around, when electricity was, well, when I was young, which was many years ago, they would, they'd tell you to make sure that you shut the lights off before you left every room, and you don't use the electricity if you can do it by hand. And so there's no need to use it with that electric beater on the eggs, because you can do that with your hand mixer. Um, so there's demand side management, I think, is something that is being overlooked. And it wasn't all that long ago when BC Hydro actually had a demand side management, a group of people that were dealing with that to figure out how you could reduce it, and they were doing it at the industrial level too, and they would go into a company and they would figure out together how they could maybe do something more efficiently and reduce the amount of electricity that was used in that process. So that was one way. There were sort of a couple of ways that we could reduce it.
Yep.
Then, is that another signal? I got to get
Yep.
used to all these signals here.
All right. So so let's move on more transportation side. So the current BC government is committed to having 10,000 public charging stations in operation, effectively doubling the number of public charging stations by 2030. Will your government maintain this commitment?
Yes. The Green Party is very committed to the electrical vehicles aspect, and they released the platform last night, and there's a whole section on what they could do with electric vehicles. There were some of them were making sure that the electric charging system is available in more places than it is now. I think it was, if I remember right, I think there was 10,000 now, and it was to double it. You can check it yourself, because I'm not sure about that one, but there are some checkers up there at the top. Maybe they can tell us whether that's right or not. So that's one of the, and then more research into the actual vehicles, and putting more emphasis on development of the bigger industrial type vehicles, like the heavy duty ones, and changing the ones from the gas and diesel that are there now, and changing them over to electricity. So that's another one of the options that are there. And they are encouraging the use of electric cars, and they have some goals in there of how many cars they would like to have on by a certain period of time. And I think that would be so they're very strong on that.
All right.
Am I within time?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh,
You're good this
no,
morning.
no cards.
Okay. Making up to
We'll
the
get
job.
this.
So part of the transition is resources. So if elected, how will your party balance respecting indigenous rights and title over lands and resources with the increasing pressure to source materials to enable the energy transition to occur?
Yeah, and that's a tricky one, because if people have lived on the land for generations and generations, they have some rights on it. And I think those rights have been recognized by the federal government. And then if you have a corporation that comes in that then wants to develop that, so number one, they have to consult. There's no question about that. But it becomes a question of, okay, so how much power do they have? Do they have veto power? Or do they not have veto power? And so I think that the best answer to that is that a company has to start at the beginning, the very beginning of them looking into whether they have that whether they have that project and whether they want to go ahead with it, they have to go and talk to the people that live there and determine, okay, do they want to talk about having this project, or do they not want to have that project? And it it will vary. And I think that it's very important that the people that live on the land have a right to say whether that project proceeds or not, and if it does, on what conditions. And then there should be something in there that makes sure that those conditions are upheld and enforced. Because we have some cases where, they go in, they've gone in, they've done some project and they finish and they leave and it's a mess. So I think that we have to be pretty stringent about the regulations and how they're enforced.
Thank you. Which one? So so with that, so with the energy transition, one of the options, so green options, there's quite a few. One of the options is available, but in terms of greenness, but it's nuclear. Is
Nuclear?
the Green Party in support of the nuclear, maintaining the nuclear ban in BC?
The Green Party's position is that the ban on nuclear should continue. And the rationale behind that, as I understand it, is that the if it's done right, that the solar, wind, geothermal, maybe tidal power, but those other alternatives, if they will be enough to supply the electricity needs. And I would add to that that we have also discounted the individuals. There's so many things that individuals can do if they're kind of given the permission to do it or given free rein to do it. Because, for instance, just the solar panels on the rooftop of a house can generate, in some cases, 100%, depending on how well built and how well insulated the house is. But it's a terrific opportunity for people to do that. Now, when we built that solar array in Hudson Hope, we were able to get a government grant to do it. But there are incentives and can be incentives for individuals to do that. And then you not only get reduction in the amount of electricity that has to be generated at the big plants, but you also get resilience, because sometimes when the power goes out, the guys that had the solar on their roof and maybe a battery system, then that was that was where you went for coffee. That's for sure. So I mean, there are some good things that can happen if individuals are given the opportunity to use their ingenuity to develop some of these things, I think.
Great, thank you. The next question is, California is a jurisdiction in North America with the highest number of electric vehicles and charging stations. On a per capita basis, however, the uptake in BC is often greater than occurring in California. If elected, what will you and your party do to help maintain this leadership?
Well, the incentives that are given to buyers of EVs have been significant effect, or had a significant effect. So I think that's one of the big ones. And then as the infrastructure develops across the province, then there's more opportunity actually for people to do that. To buy into the electric vehicles, because if you don't have the confidence that you can get to wherever you want to go without maybe stopping for an hour or something like that to recharge. So there are some things I think that have to be worked out, but the incentives are certainly there. And I think that, the growth in BC has been pretty phenomenal, really, when you look at it. So I think that the governments are on the right track, and the charging stations that have gone in, I mean, there is one, for instance, between McBride and Prince George, which is a pretty long stretch of highway, but if somebody needs it, it's there. And so, yeah, I think those are the things that we do.
All right, thanks. So the next one is if you and your party are elected, how will you lower oh, sorry, yes, where's it going? Asked that one already.
Well, you just tell me what number. I've got it here.
I wrote down the wrong number. Where'd it go? Okay, so both the federal and the provincial energy policies enable the expansion of fossil fuel extraction and use, while also making a commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If elected, how will you and your party deal with this contradiction?
Right. Good question. I mean, how are you going to, yeah, on the one hand, you're saying we have to reduce the amount of emissions going into the air and we have to, and the fossil fuel industry is the largest emitter by quite a bit. So, yes. So you're, on the one hand, you're telling them that they have to reduce their emissions, and for the health of the population, it has to be reduced. And then on the other hand, you're giving them subsidies to build things like LNG plants. So I haven't reconciled how you're going to resolve that. It doesn't seem to me that you can do both, and I don't think they're successfully doing both, because the emissions from the fossil fuel industry have been going up. And actually, when you look at it, so the other things that are needed for, the other segments of society, so a lot of those, they're starting to go down, not by much, but a little bit. But the difference is all that gap is being taken up by the increase in emissions going up from the oil and gas industry. So how you solve that dilemma? Well, you could solve it by stopping the drilling, but I don't think that's a rational thing to be able to do, because for one thing, we've sold the subsurface rights to almost all of the northeastern part of the province, where all the oil and gas is. And you can't sell somebody something and then tell them that they can't go and get it. So there would be a difficult situation if you decided to just stop it cold. So I don't see that as a sort of a rational way to approach it. Uh, you can make steps maybe to try and reduce the demand, and maybe that's what can be done. I mean, the electric vehicle industry would be part of that. But there is no easy answer to that, as far as I can tell.
I would agree with that. It's a big pie. So next one is people are concerned about the cost of living. It's one of the major issues in this election. So we'll focus more, and specifically though, is some of them are asking for the carbon tax to be dropped, the price of gas, fuels basically. So while others are asking to make it easier to switch to electric vehicle, is there your preference which way, or is there a big picture
Well,
approach?
as far as the cost of living is concerned, I think that there was a study, I think it was done by Stats Canada, and they said that, if I have this right now, you people up there in the top row, may pay attention to this one, and you can find out whether we're right or not. I'm right or not. If I'm right, I think Stats Canada concluded that the carbon taxes that had been put on oil and gas amounted to about 0.33 cents. And so, I mean, if you were looking at groceries, so if you have $100 bag of groceries, then it's an extra 33 cents that comes from the taxes. So I think that as far as cost of living is concerned, that we're running down a rabbit hole when we go after the carbon tax. And so I don't agree. I agree with the Green position that it should continue, because I think where a lot of the inflation is coming from is in groceries and in food. And if you look at it, there were no stone fruit coming out of the Okanagan this year because they had that bad weather event, right? An unusual frost, and there's more and more of those unusual things. I'm on the next question now. So it just seems to me that if you look at it, I mean, there's that on food. There's the um, reduced yield that's coming of olives and of oranges. So the price of olive oil has gone up, the price of oranges have gone up. And then there's, if you were watching the news last night, they had an item on about the coffee in Brazil and the crop, it's a much reduced yield that. So there is speculation about what that's going to do to the price of coffee. So I think that's more likely where the inflation is coming from rather than the carbon tax.
Great, thank you. So compared to the rest of the globe, BC has a unique advantage with 90% of its electricity generated from clean renewable sources. Even so, 19% of BC's energy is provided of electricity is provided by other forms, 11 provided by biomass, and 70% by fossil fuels. If elected, what will you and your party do to decrease this reliance on carbon emitting biomass and fossil fuels?
So, okay, so the fossil fuel industry is the biggest emitter, but it's followed by transportation, and it seems to me it's around 30%. I could be wrong about that. But anyway, transportation is a big emitter of gas. So if we're going to, is that what question number were you on there? Because I couldn't quite hear your.
Oh, sorry, it's number 13.
Yeah, okay. 15. They only go to 12.
13.
What? 13. Oh, okay.
Oh, good.
Okay, I didn't know about that one. Okay, well, okay. So the biggest emitter is um, the fossil fuel industry. I think it's second is the transportation industry. And what we are doing on that is trying to produce these heavy duty vehicles that can start doing the long hauls um, with electric trucks and big machinery, which would make sense for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions of transportation. And another thing, the little practical things that individuals can do, if you have a garden, if even you only have a patio and you grow a little bit of your own food, well, you're reducing the amount of, then you don't have to haul a load of, or less, you have to import from California or Mexico. And so a little bit of self-sufficiency, I think, is a good thing. And we're starting to see that. More people are starting to do canning and so on. And so they can produce their own food. And so that was number 15?
13.
13.
13.
Oh, 13. Well, I didn't have a 13 anyway. Anyway, was
Missed
that
that
an
one?
answer to your question?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, good.
So, I think, well, by here, but the climate is warming and extreme weather patterns are causing more frequent floods, droughts, landslides, and wildfires. What extent do you believe transitioning from carbon-based energy to electricity and other forms of green energy will help slow down warming and extreme weather events?
Well, yeah, because I mean, we're only at the beginning of these severe weather events, right? So, I mean, we think that what we saw in Lytton and what we saw in Jasper and what we saw in the flooding in the Fraser Valley 2 or 3 years ago, and the heat domes and so on, we're thinking that's sort of very extreme, but the scientists have been telling us for a long time that this is only the beginning of it. It's going to get worse. And so we need to do as much as we can to slow down. And some of the countries are doing it. And one of the things that Mark Carney mentioned when he spoke at the beginning of September, and he talked about in Europe how the the trend over there seems to be greater than it is in North America towards recognizing that it is a problem. And first thing you have to do if you have a problem is you have to recognize and you have to be able to name it, right? Then you can start to resolve it. We have a bit of an attitude in North America that maybe it's not real and this is just a sort of a short cycle thing, but that's not what the scientists have been telling us for a very long time. So I think that, yeah, whatever we can do, we're not going to be able to take back the carbon that we've already put in. And it lasts for a long time. And so that we're still going to get that impacts, but we can stop putting so much in, and then it will at least slow it down somewhat.
Okay. So the use of fossil fuels contributes to fine particulates, medium particulates, and all sorts of chemicals into the air we breathe. If elected, what will your party do to reduce airborne pollutants caused by the burning of fossil fuels?
Right. So, yeah, and I came from an area where there was sour gas, for instance, and sour gas H2S kills. And it's not just the particulate. So there's some major problems that are come about with the reduction or with the with the production of oil and gas. So the things that we can do, well, as I say, with the other things, I mean, you could stop taking it out of the ground. That would be one way. But as I say, I don't think that's very viable. I don't think that that's going to happen. You can do things like you can have strict regulations, and you can make sure that those regulations are adhered to. And with oil and gas, well, you've got a lot of your well sites are scattered throughout very remote areas, and it's not easy to get to. And so not always, maybe those regulations aren't always followed. So there are those kinds of things that can happen. And that's something that we would have to put an extra effort into. I mean, I had someone years ago from the who was working for the Oil and Gas Commission as an enforcer, and he came to me and he said, "Here's these 2 boxes of stuff of things that were wrong, and I couldn't do anything about it because when I'd go to do something about it, because I'd think that somebody at some oil company should have to answer to this." He said, "I was the one that got in trouble." So I think that we have to, if we really want to do something about it, we have to make sure that we're going to enforce the regulations that we have and maybe make some more stringent ones. The other thing that is a problem is water, because like a little bit, but when they drill into the ground, they use an enormous amount of water, and they send down a bunch of sand and a bunch of we've just about
They were out of time on that one, but it was
okay. Well,
honestly,
I'll finish this quickly.
you know what? I'm pretty well done asking the questions I intend to ask for you tonight. So if you want to just finish your statement regarding the water and then give yourself a closing statement to the evening, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So water is really important, and they use a lot of water in producing oil and gas, and they push it down under pressure, and they've got these sand particles in there and they push that down, and it goes out into the cracks between the rocks down there. It's low, and that opens up a pathway for the gas to come out of the end. And then some of that water comes back, and it's called returned water, and it is polluted and with some of the materials that are deep down in the earth. And so in order to get rid of that, some of it can be treated, but not on a scale that's being used. So we're wasting water, and we're then we're pumping it back down into deep disposal wells, and with the promise that it'll never come to the surface again. Well, actually, some of it is coming to the surface. We haven't heard of it in BC yet, but in the states, in some of the southern states, it's coming back to the surface, sometimes 10 or 12 miles away from where it was pumped down. But that's another issue that is really important, I think, because water is the basis of our life. And if we don't have it, well, we don't last very long. So anyway,
Right,
that's,
thank you. Any closing remarks for the crowds, for the for the
well,
people listening as well?
I'd like to, I'd like to hear what your thinking is, like what you see as the solution. There's lots of good thinking that goes on in the public. And a lot of people have good ideas about what we could do. So um, I kind of told you what I think, and I'd be interested in hearing, anybody who's got any. Well, it doesn't matter. It could be questions, but it could be thoughts that maybe you've got solutions too. So, hi.
I was just interested what your thoughts are, what the province could do to invest in carbon capture, because when you said that we put the carbon out, but we can't take it in, but a lot of people, there's been a lot of movement towards carbon capture that is really good for our planet.
Yeah. I can only tell you what my opinion is and where I based it from. I follow somebody named David Hughes who spent 35 years working for the for the federal government geological department, and he's studied this very. He says you can't scale it. And he says it's the money. I know that the oil companies are asking for a lot of government money to build these carbon capture um, facilities. He feels that it's a no, it's a non-starter, or it should be a non-starter because that it won't be effective. Now I'm not a scientist and I don't, so that I'm just passing on information that I get from somebody I respect. That's, sorry. Anybody else? Sorry. James.
Thanks a lot. They recently expanded the refinery to make biofuel out of canola, I understand, here in town. And a lot of this canola, I guess, is from the Peace or Alberta. And I mean, it's a big issue down in the States where they grow like a huge amount of corn for corn ethanol as additives and fuel. And they figure, if they replace those cornfields with solar panels, you could produce, way more like exponentially more energy with way less land, as opposed to growing crops to basically turn into biofuel, replace gas. Do you know anything about that, or is that ever talked about up in the piece? And
I don't know anything about that. Canola oil is a food, though. And so if you're going to grow it to turn it into gas, you're using up agricultural land and production for oil and gas production as opposed to food. And I don't know whether, that's taken into consideration or not. Anybody got anything else? No, over here.
Hi, Ian Gregg, C4 Radio. I'm just curious a little bit about some of the social issues that the Green Party plans to address. Like we have a pretty significant opioid or toxic drug crisis in British Columbia, really across the world anyway. But I think a lot of us know, especially on this campus and within a certain age demographic, people who might still be here otherwise if the toxic drug supply wasn't quite so bad, and if more services were in place. Obviously, it's really difficult to overhaul the entire healthcare system to address this quickly. And I understand some of the Greens platform is to reinforce and bolster healthcare. That's great. Um, But as far as the nonprofits and kind of the gap intervention organizations and NGOs that are in place, a lot of these places kind of crowdfund. They exist hand to mouth on a shoestring budget. Does the Green Party plan to support these types of organizations as well that are on the ground dealing with this crisis? Thank you.
Right. Thank you for the question, and I'm probably not going to be able to answer it in the depth that you're looking for. They just released their platform today, and I went through the parts of it that applied to this meeting, but I didn't. But I know that there is a very comprehensive plan for the homeless and so I recommend that you go to that platform and have a look. And I know that, I don't remember whether, I mean, I glanced through it, but I don't remember whether there was a specific point made as to what they would do with NGOs, but they certainly did indicate they have a plan for how to approach the problem with, and a lot of the, I have to say for the whole medical situation and the problem with Medicare in Canada, the Green Party has based a lot of their policy for that on the work that Dr. Jane Philpott did. She was for a while the Minister of Health in the federal government, but she's a practicing doctor and now is at the university in instruction and organization. But she has a plan in mind for Canada's healthcare problems, and it is based. It's actually similar to the school system, and she points out that when you move to a new community and you've got two kids, there's never a question about whether those kids are going to be able to go to school or not. It's just a given. If you go to a new place, they go to school and they'll have a teacher and they'll have a room. And she proposes that the organization, that fundamental basic fact, should exist also for the medical system. So then there wouldn't be all these people that have no doctor to go to, and which causes all kinds of other problems. And so that I'm getting away from what your question was, and I know because I don't have the answer for that right now, but I do suggest that you look at the Green Party's policy, because I think maybe there probably would be something in there. And if you want to leave your contact information, I can get you sort of an answer to the question. Okay. Anybody else?
Hi. So, I was interested in your point about hydroelectric and that it seems green, but there's upfront costs. And from what I understand, personal electric vehicles have somewhat of a similar issue with the materials that go into manufacturing. Do the BC Green Party have any goals or plans regarding expansion of electrified public transit, whether that's buses or metro or commuter rail, anything sort of like that?
Well, they did come out with a platform that includes having free um, buses, a free transit. And interestingly, it wasn't just for the Lower Mainland and Southern Vancouver Island. It was pointed to go for all parts of the province. It's more difficult to do it, in places where there's not much population. It's hard to make it work financially, but yeah, it's in their policy paper. Anybody else? Okay, there's two questions up there.
Yes, I was interested in your comment about supporting personal gardening as a method of food production. Um, I found that comment interesting because for a lot of people in BC, property ownership necessary to have a garden is becoming increasingly a problem. I was teaching in terrace recently, and it was very difficult to even find a place, let alone a place I could that was easy to afford. I guess I'm wondering, what is the Green Party's policy on supporting affordability of home and property ownership? Because clearly that's also connected to energy.
Right, and I don't, they have a part of the platform which has come out, which is food security. I haven't noticed anything, but as I say, I haven't gone through it completely, but food security is included in their platform for this election. And I don't know anything more about that right now than what I've, sort of mentioned. But yeah, I mean, it just makes sense. We used to be able to do it, to grow a lot of our own food, and it got to be pretty easy, I guess, to just go to the store and buy it. But it's good. It's good skill to have, to know how to produce your own food. At least some of it, yeah. So I'm sorry I can't give you more help, but I do refer you to the platform. And there was another one right there.
Just a question about forestry. As forests, there are big carbon sinks that sequester a lot of carbon dioxide, and year after year, and we're seeing a growing trend of how forest fires are becoming more prevalent, how they're being more dynamic, and it not only affects the environment but the communities and economy. Does your party have a policy on changing the dynamics of fighting forest fires? Because at the moment, there's a lot of techniques, including prescribed burns when forest fires get too big. But at the end of the day, not only affects the climate and the landscape, it does release quite a bit of CO2 in addition to all the economic costs. So is there any policy about changing the practice of forest fires and how we actually approach forest fire fighting?
I don't know that you keep asking my questions about the part of the policy or part of the platform I haven't read yet. But the thing is, on forests, there is a section. There's a plank in the platform on forestry. I haven't gone through it. The one of the things though that they are finding with forest fires is that um, they they really take off uh, in the areas where there's no deciduous trees, because they go up to the top, and in a spruce tree or a dead pine or something like that, and then they crown, and then that's where Jasper, I think, was very, very vulnerable. Um, but if you have an intermix of deciduous trees, then it slows it down there. So that was one of the things that came out. Actually, I came to the forestry um, thing that was here on, for the forum that was here on Saturday, and that was one of the things that they were talking about, and how we should be, that we've changed the forest from being a net sink for carbon, and it's now become, something that is, it's releasing more carbon because of the fires and everything that's happened there. So it seems to me that yeah, there is some things, but they also pointed out that there is a cycle, and what we've been doing. Well, I had actually, I don't think it came up there on Saturday, but I've read about it before. We've got this cycle of natural growth, and so uh, when the first, after there's disturbance of the land, the first thing that comes up are the willows and so on, and then it goes into the deciduous trees, and then eventually maybe into the softwood lumber and so on. But we don't do that when we replant. We go back in and we replant exactly what was there before. So we're not kind of following Mother Nature, and sort of they said I could put out a logo, and I didn't have my logo prepared, but my logo is Mother Nature bats last, and we're kind of in the ninth inning, and she's got last bats, and she's not happy. And so we're going to have to learn to work with the natural processes, as far as I can see. That's what, so again, I'm sorry that I haven't got a more specific answer for you, but talk to me next week. I'll be better. Oh, James. Oh, oh, thank you. Okay, so is that for somebody else? Yeah, I'm quite happy to stay here. I mean, I have no rush to go away. But
I do have another one if you don't mind. In regards to hydroelectric electricity and energy generation, etc. You mentioned earlier the potential of, if it's done right, a grid could be created to include tidal power, wind, solar, and so on. Just outside of town, we've got a hydrogen project being developed. Potentially, we'll see if it comes to fruition. That project, if it goes online, would consume like, I think, over 90% of what the Site C hydroelectric dam would generate to actually operate at its capacity of creating the hydrogen. That hydrogen is being operated by a mining company, Fortescue. So I would assume their ambition then would be to mine things in BC. I'm curious, all this activity, industrial activity that BC would probably need to gain a tax base to, spur other development, things we need in the province, like healthcare, whatever it may be. Um, how are we going to get the capital to invest in these new green technologies? Um, is there anything you can tell me to convince me that nuclear energy is really not needed, that we really can do it with these alternate forms? And what role then would something like mining play in BC's near future, while forestry is kind of up in the air right now?
so I can't give you any sort of brilliant ideas on, except I have read some analysis about that hydrogen plant that didn't seem to be very favorable, but I don't know enough to base an opinion, give an opinion on that. But what seems to me to happen in BC a lot, like it makes no sense to me that you would create a lot of energy and then you would give it, or not give it, but sell it at a discount to a company that's going ahead and to develop something that we have decided is dangerous for us, or that is creating a climate that is dangerous for us. So it seems to me that if we have a source of clean electricity, and I mean the dams are there now, and they've been built, and so there's no going back from that, and as long as there is water, which there was a drought last year, but at least we should use it for something that is good for us, rather than use it to produce something that is bad for us. If that makes any sense. And I don't know. It's that whole thing, like, well, it's like the LNG. How much electricity is the LNG going to take? I think we should start to discriminate between what we sell power for and what we don't. And another industry that is of concern, I think, probably, is the the mining for data. There was an example I heard about. I don't know that, I mean, they have these huge computers set up in trailers, and they were hauling them into a well site, and then just taking the natural gas directly out of the well and generating the electricity right there. And so is that the way we want to, do we need to have all that data so that if I look up for a widget on my cell phone, that I can get 17 advertisements for different widgets coming in the next day because they've sold the data to somebody. It seems to me that we should be discriminating against, or we should be making sure that if we're going to generate electricity, that it gets used for something that's for our benefit, our well, the public good, I guess. That's what.
All right, thank you. Gwen, any closing remarks?
Well, just thank you very much for coming. I do appreciate it. It's the first debate I've ever won, I have to tell you. It's I will say, I'll make a comment. It wasn't on this topic. We're off topic anyway, so it's okay. I think we need to be concerned about democracy in this province because, 2 or 3, well, I don't know what it was now, 3 weeks ago or whatever, the BC United Party withdrew its delegates or its candidates, and all those candidates had been elected by their constituencies, the people in their uh, organization they're riding, and they had named this one and this one and this one to be their delegate in a provincial election. And then in one fell swoop, there was one person, and apparently very arbitrarily or based on pressure maybe he was getting from sources outside of his area, and all of a sudden he pulls those things out. He canceled all of those candidates that had been elected in a democratic process. And I just think that's really wrong. And actually, that's what made me run because it ticked me off quite a bit. And I don't know whether that was, but it just seems to me that it's not the right way. I mean, if we want to have a democratic process and believe that we're a democracy, then we should follow through on the democracy, I think. But anyway, that's just my opinion. And that's, I just have to vent once in a while on it.
All good. Well, Gwen Johansson of the Green Party, thank you for coming out and answering our questions for this evening in regards to the energy transition. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and witnessing what Gwen had to say and listening intently and quietly, and it was very appreciated. And I'd like to thank all of the listeners out there who are followed your what you're saying and have hopefully have enjoyed this evening with us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much for coming.
So with that said, Gwen's still available for one-on-one. Anybody wants to have a little one-on-one with time?